Welcome to the Bald Brad Show. In this episode, we have a clip here of President Joe Biden talking about how he's going to lower gas prices during an economic briefing. It's really a sight to behold. We'll watch the clip in its entirety, and then we will give you the conservative commentary at the very end. As always, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the clip.
Hey, Mr. President, it's great to see you.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. We've got members of your economic and energy team here, and we're prepared to start the briefing, but we'll start by turning the floor over to you, sir.
Well, thanks. Let me start by apologizing for my voice. I'm feeling much better than I sound. You know, we're meeting today on gas prices, and we have some really good news. Gas prices are coming down. In fact, gas prices have fallen every day this summer for 38 days in a row. Now, you know, you can find gas for $3.99 or less in more than 30,000 gas stations in more than 35 states. In some cities, it's down almost $1 from last month. We've been working really hard to bring the price down. 4 months ago, I gave an order to release 1 million barrels of oil per day, for our nation, from our nation's strategic petroleum reserve. And I led the world to coordinate the largest release of oil reserves in history, including from other countries. In total, more than 240 million barrels to boost global supply. During that time, I've also been working to increase U.S. production. Today, we're producing 12 million barrels per day, and we're on track to hit a near record highs. I've been working to make sure that when the price of oil comes down, the price at the pump comes down as well, and comes down in real time. The good news is that's happening, but it's not happening fast enough. We made progress, but prices are still too high. And so here's what I'm going to do, talk about today with all of you. We need to work on this. First, we're going to look at ways to increase oil production from the existing wells and permits that exist today. The industry has more approved permits for production on federal lands than they can possibly use. That's a fact. Let me say it again. They have more than they can use. So my message to these companies is use the permits or lose them. Don't say you don't have access. Second, I'm telling the industry, you're making record profits due to Putin's war in Ukraine. Use those profits to increase production and refining. Don't use those profits to buy back your stocks and dividends. Look, thirdly, we'll talk about the global price cap on Russian oil that I got our partners to agree to last month at the G7. That'll keep supply up and Putin's revenues down. In the days and weeks ahead, I'm going to keep doing what I can to bring down the price of gas at the pump. But the real answer is to get to a clean energy economy as soon as possible. Turn this into something positive. That means cleaner renewable energy, more affordable electric vehicles, and clean energy manufactured here in the United States. That's how we'll protect the climate and create jobs. I'll have more to say about this in our discussions, and I'm more in the coming days. But look, I want to stop here and turn it over to you, Brian, and let's get this briefing started.
This president and his messaging is truly just something else. It really is wild, which is probably why Jen Psaki, as well as his communication director, took a hike. And we really see it being reflected through Karine Jean-Pierre's messaging as well, because president just doesn't have a clue, folks. But let's go through a few of the bullet points that he referred to during this briefing. The first one being the 1 million barrels from the petroleum reserve. Now, this is a drop in the bucket. We use anywhere from 12 to 20 million barrels per day. If anything, it's an opportunity for him to say that he's doing something and that he's having an effect, when in actuality, the only effect that he's having is on a reserve itself, where it's supposed to be used domestically for state and localities who have a natural disaster or declare a state of emergency, that we could send them this reserve to help them get back on their feet and recover quicker. But notice I use the term domestically because Joe Biden was selling millions of barrels of oil from our reserve to Asia as well as Europe, and selling 1 million barrels of oil to China, where it just so happens that Hunter Biden has investments in. Whew, how could have that happened? Gee, a little weird, but Democrats don't want to look under the hood, and the mainstream media wants to cover for both him and Hunter. But, if Donald Trump's kids do anything, everybody has to lose their minds. If Donald Trump sips from a glass of water, the media lose their minds. If he takes a phone call with Zelensky, start a grand jury, start the investigations. But nobody wants to talk about Hunter Biden, where there's a ton of evidence regarding these dealings. Joe Biden's spoken about it. It's in emails, it's in voicemails. But again, nobody from the Democrat side of the aisle wants to investigate the thing. The president then transitions into our next bullet point, which is using existing permits for domestic oil production. Now, it's not as simple as Biden makes it sound. There are many steps these companies have to go through before they ever begin production. I have some notes here I want to utilize that will help guide me through this bullet point, but companies have to contract rigs to drill the wells and build a sufficient inventory of permits before rigs are contracted. Furthermore, producers also have to put a drilling plan together, secure rights of way, and work with state and private landowners. This comes from Jennifer Pett, a spokesperson for the Independent Petroleum Association of America, which is a trade group that represents oil and natural gas producers. You also heard the president mention how there's over 9,000 unused permits and either use them or get rid of them, right? But that's not uncommon to see that many permits not being used under any presidential administration. So he's highlighting this really for no reason. And we have Douglas Holtz-Aitken, an economist and president of the American Action Forum, a center-right think tank, talking about this and saying that they have to be sure that the costly investment and time that it takes to turn a lease into a producing well is actually worth it. God forbid that these firms assess the durability of a global rebound before they actually put in a certain investment to get a certain return. But Joe Biden doesn't think that way. He just drill, baby, drill. Just put it down there. He doesn't understand how any of this works. Furthermore, oil and gas companies can raise funds from investors by not drilling on leases with proven reserves, said Hugh Daigle, an associate professor at the University of Texas, Hillebrand Department of Petroleum and Geosystems Engineering. There's actually an incentive for the companies not to develop these resources because for publicly traded companies, these reserves get reported and influence market valuation. So there's actually an incentive to go out and get these permits and leases, but sometimes never even use them. And you also see this in different companies trying to compete with one another because since it's a public company and it gets reported, your competitors can see this. And so they're going, well, shoot, this guy might be drilling more. We got to keep up. So let's pull more permits and leases so that we can kind of combat that. So it's kind of this mind game between these companies. Quote, sometimes there might not really even be producible oil and gas on a lease. Quote, companies sometimes hold leases as a bit of a mind game with their competitors, or even just because they didn't properly assess the production potential prior to leasing due to lack of data or that sort of thing. But again, another item that Joe Biden doesn't understand. In 2020, the oil bust created worker and supply shortages and caused companies to cut their budgets. Investors remain reluctant to invest in fossil fuel. Pavel Molchanov, an analyst at Raymond James, told CNN Business that oil and gas companies do not want to drill more. Now, that's not necessarily true. That is a very gray statement. The companies do want to drill more, but there's a lot of regulations and red tape that they need Joe Biden to remove, as well as his messaging needs to change for these companies to want to drill more to increase an incentive for them to make that type of investment. Quote, they are under pressure from the financial community to pay more dividends, to do more share buybacks instead of proverbial drill baby drill, which is the way they would have done things 10 years ago. Corporate strategy has fundamentally changed. Again, very gray area. There is truth here that they're trying to meet, their shareholders. They're trying to meet certain demands of the people that they need to represent to have share buybacks instead of just drilling. But Joe Biden it's just hounding them. Oh, just drill. We're going to keep all the red tape there. We're going to screw you over. Oh, by the way, we want to make you obsolete in the future. And we'll get to that bullet point in just one moment because it contradicts everything that Biden said for like 2 minutes and 45 seconds of his entire speech. Experts also suggested that drilling domestically is more costly than drilling overseas, which could further deter oil companies in the U.S. from upping production. Quote, while the cost to extract 1 barrel of oil in Saudi Arabia is somewhere around $10 to $15, in West Texas it can be as high as $70. This comes from Garnett Wagner, an associate professor of environmental studies at New York University, and told PolitiFact that so it simply wasn't profitable to drill with oil below $70. While oil is at 120 or more, drilling there is widely profitable. So Biden talks about this whole thing of producing oil, using these permits, but he doesn't understand the industry, he doesn't understand the market, and he doesn't understand the side of the oil companies of where they're at. But he's going to push this whole thing of using your profits to increase production, while at the same time saying that the real answer is a clean energy economy. It is so baffling how in the same briefing, in the same 4-minute time span, that he can use up 2 minutes and 45 seconds talking about how he wants to increase oil production, that he's doing everything he can, while at the same time not doing everything he can, keeping in the red tape, not working with oil companies, keeping in the regulations, not understanding how the market's working, not understanding the whole aspect of they just went through massive losses from COVID-19, that they want to make up those losses. They're privately held companies. They want to, basically help their investors and meet their investors' certain demands they're having because they're investing in the company as you would sit there and cater to them. You're not going to cater just to the president. You want to cater to those that you're trying to ultimately make more money for. But the Biden administration just doesn't understand this. And it's truly mind-boggling. And all the messaging that they're pushing here, because like I said, the last bullet point, the real answer is a clean energy economy. You're telling them to drill more. You're telling them to utilize their permits. You're telling them to take their profits and make more investments into producing more oil, all while at the same time you're saying, well, we want to increase electric vehicles. We want to make electric vehicles basically the mainstream thing by 2050. We want 50% to be by 2030. In a nutshell, you're saying, hey, we don't even want you guys around in the next 10 to 15 years. But at the same time, we want you to invest all this money into all these rigs and contracts and use up your leases and do all these things. All the while, we want to tax the crap out of you. We want to make it harder. We want to put in more legislation. We're going to get rid of pipelines. We're going to get rid of refineries. All this messaging they're pushing is just truly mind-boggling. And that's why I wanted to sit through that entire briefing that he just spoke there and say, what the hell? One end, you're saying increase domestic production, and you're saying that you're doing everything you can, which we know that's not true. And at the very tail end, you're basically saying, we want to make you obsolete. We want clean energy. I mean, just the contradiction, it's truly baffling. It really is. And it just shows the guy doesn't have a clue. We know their true agenda. They want windmills. They want wind turbines. They want solar panels. They want electric vehicles, which I'm all for. But there is a kind of a pathway you do it. You don't just force it upon people. You don't just force it upon companies. At the same time, you're a knucklehead if you're trying to force certain things upon publicly held companies here, like these oil companies, and expecting things of them. That's just, honestly, it's unreasonable. It makes sense for me that they're going to have record profits in terms of what you mean by record profits, but they just had billions of dollars of losses. I think it's only right that they recoup those $1 billion of losses, and then are kind of hesitant in terms of, do we want to invest more? All the while, you just had the World Health Organization just declare a public health emergency from the monkeypox. So if there might be another government shutdown, why would you want to go increase your production when there might be another government shutdown? You hear Los Angeles talking about it already. So I would be hesitant if I was even an investor or an oil company to go and start drilling more just because the president says so. Even if Trump was in office, it was like, oh, you need to drill more. I'd be like, I don't know, man. Like, if everybody's talking about shutting down again, or you have certain sectors of the economy talking about shutting down again, you have China possibly shutting down even further than what they already are. Like, all this stuff, it's a very volatile market at the moment. I don't blame them for not going out and just producing as much oil as possible, especially with Joe Biden in office and the Democrats leading everything. But folks, let me know what you think about all this. As always, we'll be back here tomorrow for the Bald Brad Show starting at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I'll see you later here on the Bald Brad Show.